TRS Clips, India's smartest podcast, brings you India's smartest YouTube channel. Make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you hit the bell icon. But in saying that, how have we transitioned into this modern day India where even the act of hugging is almost like looked down upon? Where if a guy and a girl hug each other, it's considered, oh my God, how are you having physical contact with each other? How did we transition into this?
So I think that as times change, things change, the narrative changes. So I really believe that, it's the stories that we tell, they actually create our identity. So if you tell a story of a man who comes home and he's drunk and he beats up his wife, but we say, oh, the wife was so good, she was so good, she never said anything, she was such a good woman, she never said anything to him, then that's what you're expecting the good wife to be, right? So the stories that we tell around us are the stories that start to define who we are. And it's interesting to think that when the Kama Sutra is written in 300 and something AD, at exactly the same point, in 325 AD, across the oceans, somewhere in Turkey, the first council of the Catholic Church is set up. And they immediately, from setting up, start saying how bad is pleasure, how bad is the body, that sex is the road to hell. On the other side, across the oceans, on the banks of the river Ganges, Vatsyayan is sitting and he's writing the Kama Sutra. And he's saying how good is pleasure, how beautiful it is, it's the path to heaven. So we have two narratives that come up at the same time. This narrative from the West does permeate our nation quite strongly because, as you know, India has always been invaded and occupied since time began almost, from the time of the Mauryas. When you think about the 5th, 6th century onwards, we've always had invaders who have always brought their own narrative with them.
So you think it was the job of the invaders, like they kind of brought these concepts of, oh my God, sex is taboo?
I think that, in a lot, like I said, the Catholic Church, even at the point of starting up, starts to say that this is bad. Okay, and we think that the British came in around the 1700s and the 1600s. Actually, no, we've had the Western world come in much earlier. The Portuguese, the Dutch, and so on. So they've been coming in. But also, like I said, with time, things change. So as people come in, as the ruling parties change, as invaders come in, they bring certain other rituals and rules with them and so on. So stories change over time. And it's just, it's really, really difficult when you start trying to change a story back. Because that's what I'm trying to do at the moment. When you start trying to go back, when you think about it, Ranveer, I'm much older than you, obviously, but I grew up in post-colonial India, okay? So I went to Wellams. I went to Lady Shri Ram College. I did literature at Lady Shri Ram College, 3 years of literature. We never studied a single ancient Indian text, okay? Not even one. So we don't even know what our past stories were. How do we even start to learn them? I can tell you anything you want about Shakespeare. I can give you every reference to context. I can talk to you about Milton from morning to night, about Paradise Lost. Till I came to this country and started to study again, I had no idea what our ancient texts even said. And when you think about it, the Kama Sutra was reinterpreted much later in life. So it's in the 1800s when actually there's an Englishman called Richard Burton who reinterprets the Kama Sutra. Now, what people don't realize is when I talk about the Kama Sutra and I talk about all these beautiful things over there, they'll always say, ma'am, tell me about the best version of the Kama Sutra to read. But that's not what it was about. These texts, whether it was the Arth Shastra, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, whether it was the Kam Shastra, they were all written as treatises. They were written almost in scientific manner. And all science in those days was dedicated to God. So they're written in the form of hymns and poetry. And they're not really, even the Natya Shastra, the book on drama and dance, they're not written for the average person to understand. They're written in metaphors. So there are commentaries that you have to read to understand what they say. So if you go back to the Kama Sutra, the only thing that makes sense to the normal reader who doesn't know about what the other metaphors mean, the only thing that makes sense is the little tiny chapter on positions. because you understand what a position means. And that's why we've come to understand that the Kama Sutra is just about positions. We don't know what the positions are. We don't know why they were talking about. There was a reason over there for the positions as well. But yeah, so there is this point about it changes, the narrative changes, but if you don't even have the basic background of knowing what it was about, you can't actually go back to that story.
Beautiful.
If you think about it, I mean, just to mention, when you think about it, even you take the Mahabharata and so on, you take a lot of the Purans. Over the centuries, those Purans existed in some way or the other. And they've all been depicted in some kind of statues and sculpture and painting and so on. The Bhagavad Gita has got no visual depictions till we get to the 1800s. It was one of those texts that was lost. When Mahatma Gandhi read it for the first time, he was already studying in England as a lawyer, and he read it the first time in a translation in English. So people in our country weren't growing up with any of our old texts.
And I also feel there's this whole wave of writers who's trying to bring back ancient Indian knowledge. That includes you. That includes Mr. Amish Tripathi.